You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Early feedback is one of the most powerful mechanisms in agile delivery because it shortens the distance between intention and reality. The orientation is straightforward. By frequently demonstrating working increments, teams reduce uncertainty, align stakeholder expectations, and enable responsible change. Without early feedback, organizations risk marching far down the wrong path before discovering usability problems, strategic misfits, or technical flaws. With it, learning arrives quickly, while the cost of adjustment is still low. Early feedback is not about perfection. It is about visibility. It allows sponsors to see value emerge, users to test usability, and risk partners to gauge compliance or safety before commitments deepen. This cycle creates confidence that delivery is advancing responsibly and honestly. Frequent demonstration keeps alignment alive, ensuring that strategy and execution remain connected through observable, testable results rather than delayed promises. The rationale for frequent demonstration lies in exposing real behavior early, not imagined outcomes. Plans, wireframes, or slide decks may provide vision, but they cannot reveal how a system actually behaves under real conditions. A working increment shows whether assumptions hold, whether usability works for actual users, and whether risks emerge in practice. For example, a healthcare system might assume that a new workflow will reduce errors, but only a working increment used in realistic scenarios can confirm or refute that belief. By exposing behavior early, teams avoid the sunk cost of investing months into functionality that misses the mark. Frequent demonstrations create a rhythm of learning where small bets are tested before large commitments are made. They transform uncertainty into evidence, enabling better-informed trade-offs and protecting the organization from the expensive surprises that come when feedback is delayed until release. Defining what counts as a working increment is critical for meaningful feedback. A true working increment is integrated, testable behavior that a user or system can observe under realistic conditions. It is not a mock-up, not a disconnected prototype, and not a partial component with no observable outcome. For example, even a minimal search for products flow in an online store qualifies as a working increment if it connects interface, logic, and storage to produce a real result. Conversely, a redesigned interface without functional back-end integration is not truly working because it hides complexity and defers risk. By requiring increments to be complete across the vertical slice, demonstrations become genuine tests of fitness. This definition sets the bar high enough to produce valuable feedback while keeping slices small enough to deliver quickly. It ensures that each demo reflects reality rather than a polished illusion. Feedback cadence must be planned alongside delivery cadence to create predictability. If demonstrations are sporadic or ad hoc, stakeholders lose confidence, and opportunities for learning are missed. By scheduling feedback sessions at regular intervals, often aligned with sprint reviews or increment boundaries, teams establish a reliable rhythm. This cadence signals to stakeholders when they can expect to see progress and when their input will be sought. For example, a team may commit to demonstrating working increments every 2 weeks, regardless of whether the goal is large or small. This predictability strengthens engagement, as stakeholders know their presence and feedback are valued consistently. Cadence also reinforces accountability, ensuring that increments are ready for observation on schedule. When feedback cadence is treated as a core discipline, it transforms demonstrations from optional showcases into integral checkpoints that shape what happens next. Stakeholder selection determines the quality and relevance of feedback. It is not enough to invite a narrow group of participants. Effective demonstrations include representative users, sponsors, and risk partners. Each brings a different lens to the table. Users test usability and adoption, sponsors assess strategic alignment, and risk partners examine compliance or safety implications. For example, in a financial system increment, customer representatives might confirm ease of use, executives might validate revenue impact, and compliance officers might check adherence to regulations. If any of these perspectives are missing, feedback risks being incomplete or misleading. Stakeholder selection requires deliberate thought to balance diversity with focus, ensuring that feedback reflects the whole system of interest. By including the right voices early, teams surface trade-offs transparently and reduce the chance of late-stage conflicts. Stakeholder diversity enriches the conversation, making feedback more robust and actionable. Preparation is the invisible backbone of effective demonstrations. Without it, sessions can drift into technical minutiae or unfocused conversations that confuse rather than clarify. Preparation means aligning acceptance criteria, success signals, and talking points before the demo. For example, if the increment goal is to reduce error rates in order processing, the demo should show the old versus new error data, walk through the workflow, and highlight improvements. Talking points should frame outcomes, not internal mechanics such as code changes or tool configurations. Preparation ensures that the focus stays on impact and relevance. It also gives stakeholders the context they need to provide informed feedback rather than reacting blindly. Well-prepared demonstrations feel purposeful and structured, leaving participants confident that their time was respected and their input will shape decisions. Preparation turns demonstrations from chaotic showcases into deliberate learning sessions that reinforce alignment. Outcome-first framing is the key to making demonstrations compelling and relevant. Instead of beginning with a technical walkthrough, the team starts with the problem being addressed, the intended change, and the observable results. This framing centers the discussion on fitness for purpose rather than internal mechanics. For example, a team might say, "Last cycle we heard users struggled with checkout errors. Our goal was to reduce abandonment. Here's the new workflow, and here's what happens when a user completes a purchase." This narrative connects directly to outcomes, showing cause and effect. It ensures stakeholders discuss whether the increment solves the intended problem rather than whether it was built correctly. Outcome-first framing keeps alignment alive, reminding everyone that the purpose of increments is to deliver change that matters. It elevates demonstrations from technical proof to strategic evidence, where the measure is impact, not activity. Thin slice strategy reinforces the principle that smaller increments create faster and safer feedback loops. By demonstrating small, coherent behaviors, teams reduce the blast radius if signals turn out negative. For instance, a team might release just the add to cart functionality before rolling out the entire checkout flow. If adoption or usability issues surface, the cost of change is limited, and adjustments can be made quickly. Thin slices also allow feedback to accumulate steadily, giving stakeholders confidence that progress is real and that their input shapes direction. Attempting to demonstrate large, complex features at once increases risk, as problems emerge only after heavy investment. Thin slices embody the agile value of learning early and often. They make feedback less intimidating for stakeholders and less costly for teams, reinforcing that progress should be steady and observable rather than delayed and risky. Telemetry capture transforms demonstrations from subjective impressions into measurable learning opportunities. By defining events, observation windows, and thresholds in advance, teams ensure that demos generate data alongside discussion. For example, a new login flow may be instrumented to capture success rates, error frequency, and time to completion. Demonstrations then present not only visible behavior but also quantitative signals of performance. This data anchors feedback in evidence, reducing the risk of relying solely on anecdotes or opinions. Telemetry also enables post-demo monitoring, ensuring that learning continues after the session ends. By embedding measurement into increments, demonstrations become part of a scientific cycle: hypothesis, experiment, observation, conclusion. Telemetry capture ensures that feedback is not just heard but quantified, strengthening confidence in decisions. It also creates transparency, as stakeholders can see the evidence behind claims rather than taking them on trust alone. Mixed method feedback balances qualitative and quantitative insights. Observing user reactions, gathering comments, and listening to concerns provide context and nuance. At the same time, telemetry data and performance metrics provide objectivity and scale. For instance, a team may notice that users appear confused during a demo walkthrough while also seeing a measurable increase in completion rates. The combination helps interpret results accurately, avoiding single-source bias. Qualitative feedback explains the why behind behaviors, while quantitative signals confirm the what and how much. Without this balance, teams risk overreacting to isolated anecdotes or dismissing valuable experiential insights. Mixed methods provide a holistic view of whether an increment achieves its goal. They also strengthen stakeholder trust, as decisions are based on multiple lines of evidence rather than narrow perspectives. This approach turns demonstrations into well-rounded learning opportunities that inform robust, responsible decisions. Safety for candor ensures that feedback sessions are honest and valuable rather than performative. Participants must know that negative findings are welcome and will not trigger blame. Without this safety, stakeholders may hesitate to voice concerns, and teams may hide flaws. Safety norms may include explicit reminders that we are here to learn, not to judge, or facilitators modeling openness by highlighting risks themselves. For example, a team might acknowledge upfront that a demo feature is an early experiment and invite critique. By normalizing candor, teams surface issues when they are cheapest to address. Safety also fosters a culture of trust, where feedback is seen as a shared responsibility rather than a threat. Honest input, even when uncomfortable, is what makes demonstrations valuable. By protecting candor, organizations ensure that early feedback fulfills its purpose as a mechanism for learning and alignment. Accessibility and remote readiness expand the inclusivity of feedback. Demonstrations must be designed so all participants, regardless of location, bandwidth, or assistive needs, can engage effectively. This might include ensuring captioning for remote calls, providing recordings for asynchronous review, or offering interfaces compatible with screen readers. Without these accommodations, feedback risks being skewed toward the most privileged participants, missing critical perspectives. For example, if users with accessibility needs cannot engage with a demo, the system may ship with unseen flaws that undermine inclusivity. Remote readiness is equally vital, as distributed teams and stakeholders are now the norm. By investing in accessible, remote-friendly practices, organizations ensure that feedback is broad, representative, and equitable. This inclusivity strengthens alignment, making increments reflect the needs of the whole system rather than a narrow subset of voices. Privacy and confidentiality controls are essential when demonstrations involve sensitive data or early-stage features. Test environments must protect real user data, and consent should be obtained if recordings are made. Confidentiality agreements may be necessary when external stakeholders are involved. For example, a demo of a healthcare feature should use anonymized records or synthetic data to protect patient privacy. Without such safeguards, organizations risk violating trust and legal obligations. Privacy controls ensure that learning occurs responsibly without creating exposure. They also signal respect for stakeholders, reinforcing that alignment includes ethical care as well as functional delivery. Confidentiality strengthens confidence that participation and feedback will not lead to unintended disclosure. By embedding privacy into demonstrations, organizations maintain the integrity of both the process and the outcomes. Conflict handling plans prepare teams for the reality that stakeholders may react differently to demonstrations. Some may celebrate progress, while others may question direction or demand changes. Without a plan, these divergent reactions can derail momentum. Conflict handling involves clarifying decision rights, establishing evidence standards, and setting protocols for escalation. For example, the product owner may have final decision authority, but only after reviewing evidence and stakeholder perspectives. By agreeing on these rules upfront, the team prevents demonstrations from becoming contentious battlegrounds. Conflict handling reframes disagreements as constructive dialogue, where evidence, not volume or authority, carries weight. This discipline ensures that feedback remains productive and alignment intact. Even when views diverge sharply, anti-patterns in early feedback reveal what weakens its value. One is substituting slideware or mock-ups for working behavior, which creates false confidence and delays real learning. Another is overscripted demos that hide risks, presenting a polished performance rather than exposing true system behavior. A third is collecting feedback without assigning clear owners, leaving valuable insights to languish without action. These anti-patterns erode trust, as stakeholders learn that demonstrations are more theater than transparency. They also waste opportunities to reduce uncertainty while it is still cheap. Recognizing and avoiding these pitfalls keeps feedback authentic and actionable. Strong demonstrations resist the temptation to impress and instead embrace the vulnerability of showing real progress. By avoiding anti-patterns, teams preserve the honesty and integrity that make early feedback a cornerstone of agile alignment. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Feedback intake channels are the structured pathways through which insights from demonstrations are captured. Without consistent intake, valuable observations can vanish into scattered notes or casual conversations. Channels may include shared forms for comments, digital boards for ratings, or structured chat spaces for questions. The goal is to funnel feedback directly into forums where it can be acted upon, not left dangling. For example, after a demo of a new scheduling system, stakeholders might log issues into a designated feedback tracker that routes them into refinement discussions. Standardizing intake ensures comparability, reduces duplication, and preserves evidence for later analysis. It also signals respect for stakeholder input, showing that feedback is not just heard, but recorded and processed. By institutionalizing channels, teams make feedback a reliable part of the delivery cycle rather than an informal side effect. Decision rules translate signal patterns into clear next steps, ensuring that feedback leads to action rather than endless debate. Pre-agreed criteria guide whether to expand, adjust, or stop based on what demonstrations reveal. For example, a rule might state that if adoption exceeds 70%, the increment can expand. If errors exceed 10%, adjustments are required. If regulatory non-compliance is discovered, work must stop. These rules prevent ambiguity and reduce the influence of opinion or hierarchy. They also accelerate decision-making, as the thresholds for action are already defined. By codifying decision rules, teams transform feedback into a driver of alignment rather than a source of paralysis. Decisions become predictable, transparent, and accountable, reinforcing trust with stakeholders who can see how evidence directly informs direction. Rapid follow-ups make feedback actionable while context is still fresh. Instead of waiting until the next planning cycle, teams schedule micro-adjustments and confirmatory checks within days of the demonstration. For example, if users found navigation confusing, the team may deploy a quick tweak and verify improvement before the memory fades. Rapid follow-ups reduce the cost of change, since small adjustments are easier before work hardens. They also show stakeholders that feedback is valued and acted upon quickly, strengthening engagement. Waiting weeks to respond often dulls the impact of feedback, as context is lost and trust erodes. By building rapid response into the cycle, teams keep momentum alive and reinforce the idea that early feedback is a catalyst for continuous improvement, not a ritual without consequence. Cohort-based rollouts extend the scope of feedback by exposing increments to limited groups before full release. Instead of risking all users at once, a feature may first be released to internal staff, then a subset of customers, and only later the entire population. This strategy improves signal quality by observing real-world usage while limiting exposure if problems arise. For instance, a bank introducing a new mobile authentication flow might pilot it with 1,000 users before scaling. Cohort rollouts not only protect stability, but also generate feedback from progressively broader perspectives. They allow comparison across groups, surfacing adoption challenges or risk signals early. This staged exposure strengthens alignment by ensuring that increments are validated in real conditions before wider release, turning feedback into a structured, low-risk progression. Comparative tests refine feedback by isolating effects. When feasible, teams use controlled variations, such as A/B testing, to determine whether observed differences truly result from the increment. For example, an e-commerce site may test two versions of a checkout page to see which reduces abandonment. Comparative tests increase confidence in interpretation, preventing overreaction to noise or coincidence. They bring scientific rigor into demonstrations, transforming feedback into experiments with measurable outcomes. This method is particularly useful when decisions carry high stakes, as it reduces the risk of drawing incorrect conclusions. Comparative tests require careful setup and ethical consideration but pay dividends in clarity. By using controlled variations, teams make feedback sharper, ensuring that next steps are guided by evidence of cause and effect, rather than anecdote or assumption. Backlog updates ensure that feedback changes what the team does next. Instead of treating feedback as advisory, it is used to refine items, reorder priorities, or add or retire slices. For example, if stakeholders confirm that a feature solves the intended problem, related backlog items may be accelerated. If usability issues arise, new stories are added to address them. Retiring work is equally important, as feedback may reveal that certain planned items no longer add value. By updating the backlog systematically, teams demonstrate that feedback is not ornamental, but decisive. This practice makes alignment visible, as the backlog itself evolves to reflect current evidence. It also keeps stakeholders engaged, since they can see their input translated into real changes. Backlog updates embody the principle that agile delivery is guided by learning, not fixed assumptions. Cross-functional debriefs synthesize the many perspectives generated during demonstrations. After a feedback session, product managers, engineers, designers, support staff, and risk partners meet to interpret what was heard and observed. Each brings a lens that others may miss. For instance, a usability complaint might appear minor to engineers but signal major adoption risk to product and support. Debriefs consolidate these views into a single, coherent interpretation of implications. This practice avoids fragmented responses, where each discipline reacts independently, without coordination. By creating a unified view, debriefs turn feedback into aligned action. They also strengthen collaboration, as teams learn to respect and integrate diverse perspectives. Cross-functional synthesis ensures that decisions reflect the whole system, not just one domain, making alignment more robust and sustainable. Evidence packaging prepares feedback in a form that stakeholders can digest and act upon. Raw notes and data may be overwhelming or fragmented. Packaging means creating concise summaries that explain what changed, why it matters, and what will happen next. For example, a summary might show that a new workflow reduced errors by 15%, outline remaining issues, and propose adjustments. These summaries provide clarity for decision forums, executives, or external partners. Evidence packaging prevents the loss of signal in noise and ensures that learning scales across the organization. It also builds trust as stakeholders see that feedback is processed and communicated responsibly. By investing in packaging, teams make feedback actionable beyond the immediate demo participants, embedding it into strategic decision-making. Partner and vendor loops extend feedback practices to external contributors. Many increments depend on third-party services, suppliers, or regulators, and their input must be integrated into the same cadence. For example, a payment provider may need to validate compliance evidence during pilot releases, or a vendor may provide telemetry from their system that affects performance. Engaging partners early reduces boundary risks and surfaces misalignments while adjustments are still feasible. Vendor loops also foster transparency, showing external contributors that their role in alignment is valued. By embedding them into the feedback rhythm, organizations reduce surprises at launch and improve ecosystem trust. Feedback becomes a networked activity, not just an internal ritual, ensuring that alignment spans the full chain of dependencies. Compliance and audit trails preserve the defensibility of demonstrations. Feedback sessions may involve sensitive data, regulated processes, or risk decisions. By storing consent forms, captured findings, and documented decisions as standard artifacts, organizations ensure accountability. For example, in a healthcare setting, audit trails might show that feedback was gathered from anonymized records and that consent was obtained for recordings. Compliance artifacts demonstrate that learning occurred responsibly, reinforcing trust with regulators and stakeholders. Audit trails also protect the organization if questions arise later about decisions or evidence. By embedding compliance into feedback practices, organizations avoid creating a parallel process for governance. Demonstrations remain transparent and defensible, blending agility with accountability seamlessly. Loop health metrics measure how well the feedback system itself is working. Metrics such as feedback latency, decision velocity, and rework due to missed signals indicate the efficiency and effectiveness of the loop. For example, if it takes weeks for feedback to reach decision makers, the loop is too slow. If many defects emerge late, it suggests feedback failed to surface risks early enough. By tracking these measures, teams identify bottlenecks and continuously improve cadence. Loop health metrics make feedback a managed process rather than an ad hoc activity. They also demonstrate to stakeholders that the organization cares about the quality of learning as much as the quality of delivery. This reflective layer ensures that feedback remains a living, evolving discipline rather than stagnating into ceremony. Automation and tooling reduce the overhead of feedback practices, making them sustainable at scale. Tools can provision demo environments, capture telemetry automatically, schedule follow-ups, and distribute feedback summaries. For example, automated dashboards might display adoption metrics in real time during a demonstration. Automation frees teams from manual coordination, allowing them to focus on interpreting signals rather than chasing logistics. Tooling also increases consistency, ensuring that feedback is captured and processed the same way across cycles. By lowering effort and increasing reliability, automation strengthens cadence and scalability. It ensures that early feedback remains practical even as organizations grow. This integration of technology with process reflects Agile's emphasis on reducing waste and amplifying learning. Scaling practices extend feedback norms across multiple teams without adding excessive ceremony. Standardized templates for evidence, decision rules, and demo structures create consistency while leaving room for local adaptation. For example, all teams might follow the same format for capturing success signals and packaging evidence, but customize which metrics they track. Scaling creates coherence across programs, allowing portfolio leaders to interpret feedback comparably. It also reduces the learning curve for stakeholders who engage with multiple teams. Standardization ensures quality without burdening teams with unnecessary process. By scaling feedback responsibly, organizations turn early feedback into a systemic capability, not just a team-level practice. Alignment becomes reliable across units, reinforcing trust that delivery is advancing in step with strategy. Success evidence shows whether early feedback practices are making a difference. Indicators include reduced late-stage rework, faster attainment of outcomes, and increased stakeholder confidence. For example, if usability issues that once surfaced after release are now resolved during demos, feedback is working. If cycle times shrink because course corrections happen earlier, success is evident. If stakeholders show stronger trust in plans, confidence is growing. Success evidence demonstrates that early feedback is not just ritual but impact. It validates the investment in cadence, tooling, and discipline. Over time, the cumulative effect is a more adaptive, aligned, and resilient organization. By showing concrete benefits, success evidence closes the loop, proving that early feedback fulfills its promise of turning learning into change. In conclusion, early feedback transforms delivery from assumption-driven activity into evidence-driven adaptation. Part 2 has shown how intake channels, decision rules, and rapid follow-ups ensure feedback is captured and acted upon. Cohort rollouts, comparative tests, and backlog updates deepen learning, while cross-functional debriefs and evidence packaging make insights coherent and communicable. Partner loops and compliance trails extend feedback across boundaries responsibly. Loop health metrics, automation, and scaling practices ensure that feedback itself evolves as a sustainable system. Finally, success evidence proves the value, showing reduced rework, faster progress, and stronger trust. Together, these practices highlight the power of frequent demonstrations of working increments. They reduce uncertainty, align expectations, and accelerate responsible change by ensuring that learning reliably shapes what the team does next. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.